Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, That Model Railway Guy, and welcome to a brand new tutorial. Now, at the end of last week's video, you saw me ballasting a lot of track on the layout, but I specifically didn't show you how I did the points. And that's because at the same time, I actually filmed a much more in-depth video so I could show you that process in more detail. Ballasting points can be a bit nerve-wracking, especially if it's the first time you've done it. After all, just how do you get the glue onto the ballast without accidentally sticking the points together? Well, I know I was a bit worried the first time I had to do it as well, but thankfully I've done enough of them now that I've built up a little bit of a process, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. Now, as with all of my tutorials, do bear in mind that this isn't the only way to go about ballasting points, it's just the way that I do it, but hopefully you'll still get something useful from this video. With that said, let's head over to the layout, shall we? So here is the point I'll be ballasting today, and as you can see, I've already done most of the other track around this area. The actual point itself is untouched though, and I was very careful not to get glue near this when I was ballasting the rest of the track. It's definitely a good idea to ballast the points at a different time so that the glue on the rest of your layout has had time to set. And I don't want to scare anyone, but obviously ballasting points is a bit more complicated and has the potential to go very wrong, especially if you're relying on the point blades to transfer power. The key here is definitely going to be patience, so give yourself plenty of time and don't try to do too much at once. With that said, let's get started. So the first thing I like to do is an optional step, but I do think it makes things slightly easier on yourself later on, and that is to paint the spaces between the sleepers grey. I just go in with a very fine brush and try to spread it around there as much as possible. The reason I do this is because a grey base coat will hide any gaps in the ballast later on. If we just left this as plain wood or cork, then that might show through later on just like this. Now on plain track it's fairly easy to add a dab of PVA glue and fill the hole, but for points I've found it's best to avoid that if you can. You can see I'm getting it right underneath the rails here, so a small fine brush will definitely be useful for this task. And of course, if you're smart, you could paint these areas before you lay the points in the first place. That would definitely make this step a lot easier, so if you haven't started laying track yet, figure out where your points are going to be and paint those areas grey before you fix the points in position. With that done and the paint dry, let's move on to laying some actual ballast. So this is going to be similar to the last step, but to stick our ballast down, what I'm actually going to do now is put some PVA glue between all the sleepers. Normally when we ballast track, we put the ballast down first and then use a watery glue solution over the entire area so that it spreads out as much as possible. With points though, we don't want the glue to spread into any unwanted areas like the mechanism or between the blades. Instead, we want to be very precise, so we'll put the glue down first and then the ballast on top of this later on. Use the PVA neat, and again using a fine brush, cover the gaps between the sleepers. You also want to be careful around the blades too. You don't want to accidentally glue them to the sides, or much more likely is that excess glue gets in between the blades and the rail, which could stop the power getting through. Again, a fine brush is handy here so that you can get under the blades without touching them. With the glue down, let's now sprinkle some ballast over the top, and we're going to be very cautious here. Just take a tiny pinch at a time and drop it in between the sleepers in very small amounts. I'd recommend having a clean, dry brush nearby so that you can move particles off the top of the sleepers and down into the gaps. More importantly though, and it's becoming a bit of a theme for this video, you'll want to make sure the blades and the mechanism stay free from any bits of ballast because we don't want those jamming up the points. And this is where the grey paint I put down earlier is really handy because it means if there are any gaps in the ballast, it doesn't draw the eye quite so much. And bear in mind, you don't need to do the whole point this way. At the moment, I'm just focusing on the moving parts because this is where the most care is needed. We'll take care of the two diverging routes later on. I would also flip the points back and forth a bit too, as this will dislodge any bits of ballast around the mechanism that might be too close. This also has the advantage of helping clear out the blades too, as the vibrations will scatter the ballast particles away from any moving parts. We'll also want to take this opportunity to do the other side of the mechanism too. There's a small area here that will need to ballast, but that's as close as you need to get. The rest is just standard sleepers like the rest of the point. Don't forget to do the outside of the point as well. This is slightly easier, but you'll still want to be careful of any excess glue getting into the wrong places. The most care is needed around the tie bar as this moves side to side with the point, so be sure to leave a little bit of a gap here. And at this point, if anything is getting jammed or isn't working correctly, you still have time to fix it before the glue dries. Once you're happy with the ballast in this area though, it's best to leave it all a while so it can dry properly. So let's do that now and we'll come back in a little bit. So a little time has passed and you can see the glue and ballast is now stuck in place. Now earlier on we tackled all the moving parts, but we still have to ballast the rest of the point where the two lines diverge. Luckily this is a lot more simple as we can pretty much do this the same way we ballast normal track. Let's start by sprinkling our ballast over the area. Again, you want to be a bit more conservative here than usual as we're only ballasting a small area and we don't want any excess making its way back to the moving parts. As per normal, we want to get this in between the sleepers and around the edges of the track. A few areas we do want to keep clear though are the frogs up here, as the flanges on our locos and rolling stock need to pass through these areas smoothly. And also the check rails need to be kept clear as well for exactly the same reason. They are a little bit deeper than the frogs, but light brushing should remove any ballast that we don't want in there. Keep an eye out for little gaps like this as well. You can fill them by adding a pinch more ballast or just by redistributing some from elsewhere. And finally, with all the ballast in place, it's time to add the glue. This time we can do it in the more traditional way of using a 50-50 mix of PVA and water with a few drops of washing up liquid. If you've seen my other videos where I've done ballasting, you'll know I like to spray the track with some water too, but be careful here as you don't want the water to move the ballast around into those areas we're trying to keep clear. And then it's just a case of adding the glue with a syringe. Obviously, you don't need to go back over the ballast we glued down earlier, so be sure to keep well away from that area. In fact, I'm not flooding the track here like I usually do, I'm generally just adding glue drop by drop and letting it spread out. You can see the PVA running along the rails, and what you don't want to happen is for that to run back to the blades and the spring, so definitely be more conservative than you usually would. Even though we're not gluing any moving parts here, we are still in close proximity to them. This is a much quicker part of the process though, and as long as you're careful, it shouldn't take much time at all. I would say though that it's still a good idea to do this separately from the rest of the ballasting, just in case anything does go wrong. So with the glue now drying, we'll leave this overnight, and that is essentially the entire process. But critically, we need to come back and test everything in the morning. Okay, so everything is now fully dry and the point certainly looks much better fully ballasted like this. You can see I've also finished off ballasting all the other points in this area too, so the track work is looking much more complete. Of course, we don't just need it to look good, we want it to be functional too. Again, I'm going to start by just flipping the point back and forth a few times to check that everything is moving as it should be and there's nothing getting caught or preventing the blades from touching the rails. And also, before you run any locos over it, you will need to give the top of the rails a good clean to remove any excess glue that might have dried on them, as this will stop power getting to the wheels. With that said though, I think it's about time we try running a loco over this set of points. So here comes the Kaylee 812 now, and as you can see, it's having no issues running over the point. We can see that the power is definitely continuous along the full length, as otherwise it would have stopped by now, so that is a really good sign. And we'll flip the points in the opposite direction just to make sure that the other route is all okay as well. And don't forget to check if the loco bumps at all or gets caught anywhere along the point. If it does, it's probably the flanges getting caught on a stray piece of dried ballast. If that is the case though, just have a closer look and you can usually chip it away with a cocktail stick without too much trouble. Of course, the Kaylee 812 is a tender loco with lots of pickups, so let's really put this point to the test by running the Hornby Ruston through it too. This loco has a tiny wheelbase, so if there are any problems with the power, this should definitely identify them, but as you can see, again, it's totally fine. It's worthwhile testing your points with a very small loco like this, or one that you know is a bit dodgy, as if you can get that running smoothly, then the rest of your loco should be absolutely fine as well. So I hope this tutorial has been useful. I know ballasting points seems a bit scary, but hopefully this video has calmed some of your fears. If you did find it helpful, then please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon too to see future videos. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!